Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are setting the stage to uncover a massive, real-time transformation. Literally, as we speak, we're seeing how American influence and the sweeping forces of globalization are completely reshaping India. And I'm super excited to guide you through this, because we're going to move way past the simple headlines. We're actually going to use data, historical context, and direct evidence to see how an entire civilization is negotiating its identity right now in the 21st century. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the whole globalization versus Americanization debate, move into the H-1B brain gain, look at workplace culture clashes, dive into the family identity crisis, zoom out to geopolitics, and finally, talk about forging a hybrid future. Okay, let's jump right into part one, globalization or just Americanization. So, I really want you to ponder this for a second. With the massive, undeniable influx of Western media, fashion, and corporate culture into India, is this just a Trojan horse eroding local traditions? Are we basically seeing a flattening of global cultures into one single copy-pasted American model? Or is there something much more complex and resilient happening underneath the surface? To really figure that out, we have to get our terms straight. Globalization is the two-way, worldwide integration of trade, culture, and ideas, right? It goes both ways. Americanization, on the other hand, is homogenization, basically everything molding around US media, corporate models, and geopolitical narratives. Now, for a lot of young Indians who are binge-watching Netflix or debating US-style politics online, these two concepts can feel like the exact same thing, but actually, they really aren't. Because the reality on the ground, it's actively pushing back against homogenization. Get this, according to a 2021 Kantar survey, a whopping 68% of Indian youth wear a hybrid style. They aren't just tossing out their culture, they're adapting it. They're pairing a traditional kurta with a pair of Western denim jeans. It's a perfect visual that local diversity absolutely isn't dying. It's just actively negotiating with global trends to create this really cool, vibrant, hybridized identity. And, we see this exact same hybridization in media, too. Sure, 60% of urban Indian youth consume Western music and movies. Global pop stars like Taylor Swift and BTS have absolutely massive fan bases there. But right alongside them is Bollywood, which generated over $2.5 billion in 2022. And maybe even more fascinating, regional cinema. Industries like Tollywood and Collywood, they now account for half of India's box office revenue. The cultural diet isn't getting flattened into one flavor, it's just getting a lot more diverse. All right, moving on to section 2, the H-1B brain gain. Let's rewind a bit and walk through this timeline, because the economic side of this is wild. Back in the 1970s and 80s, India's top engineers headed straight to Silicon Valley during the hardware boom, building a really stellar reputation. Then, in the 90s, India liberalized its economy. By 1999, the whole Y2K threat hit, meaning US companies desperately needed IT help and Indian firms totally stepped up to the plate. Fast forward to 2022, and boom, India has exploded into the third largest startup ecosystem in the entire world, boasting over 61,400 recognized startups. Now, here is the fascinating, completely unintended consequence of US immigration policy. For decades, right, all we heard about was the brain drain, top talent leaving India for good. But because the US put strict caps on H-1B visas, all these highly skilled workers who learned cutting-edge computer science with the hope of moving abroad were either forced to just stay in India or they had to return when their visas expired. That restriction totally flipped the script. It created a massive brain gain that supplied the exact local workforce needed to actually build those 61,000 startups. Which brings us to section 3, toxic culture versus hierarchy. So as all this talent flows back and forth, they are crashing into two very different corporate worlds. The American work culture is generally described as direct, no-nonsense, and boundary-driven. You know the drill. You clock in, do your job, and leave. Conversely, the legacy Indian work culture is often described as heavily hierarchy-driven, marked by this relentless timeline grind, where, unfortunately, productivity is often mistakenly equated with just being available round the clock. And this clash creates a massive dilemma for young professionals, which was recently highlighted by some eye-opening blind survey data. Almost half, 48% of Indian tech workers in the US are totally open to joining homegrown Indian firms. But 47% say their biggest fear in doing so is a toxic workplace culture. And honestly, the data backs up their fears. 83% of Indian IT professionals report experiencing burnout, and 1 in 4 are working over 70 hours a week. No way that's sustainable. So it really boils down to this exact sentiment from a verified Microsoft employee. They said,
we need to find a way to pivot mindset and boost mental health. For India's startup ecosystem to truly thrive and keep attracting that top-tier global talent, just building billion-dollar unicorns isn't going to cut it anymore. Establishing a healthy work-life balance and shedding that burnout-driven culture, that is the ultimate test for their next big phase of growth.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, the family identity crisis.
Okay, so let's take this from the office to the living room. Historically, Indian families operated on a collectivist joint family model. This was heavily influenced by the Karta system, where one top-level leader, or custodian, basically protects and provides for the entire extended family. But today, urbanization, global career aspirations, and definitely Western cultural influences are rapidly shifting society toward the nuclear family. This new model is way more individualistic, and it prioritizes personal career growth over those traditional multi-generational household duties.
And for Gen Z, this social shift is completely supercharged by the internet. Digital life offers Indian youth something they've rarely had: anonymity. On platforms like Reddit, they can connect and debate without the heavy weight of rigid, inherited identities like caste or strict family expectations. It gives them this incredible new sense of agency. But, it's a double-edged sword. Breaking away from that built-in collectivist family support also opens the door to the very modern epidemic of digital loneliness and isolation.
Now, let's zoom out for Section 5, Geopolitics and Soft Power.
On a macro level, there is a seriously powerful mutual dependency at play here. The United States deeply relies on the massive Indian diaspora. We're talking over 4.5 million strong for high-skilled tech talent, medical professionals, and top-tier corporate leadership. But on the flip side, India strategically leverages U.S. technological partnerships and military alliances to counterbalance its own regional threats, particularly from an increasingly assertive China. They really need each other. Let me throw a number at you: 70. According to a 2023 Gallup poll, 70% of Americans hold a favorable view of India. That is a massive number. It showcases a remarkably strong mutual goodwill that actually outpaces many of America's traditional older allies. It really just proves that the people-to-people ties, driven by students crossing borders, tech workers interacting, and shared democratic norms, are the absolute strongest pillar of this entire geopolitical relationship. And hey, we can't forget, India is not just some passive receiver of American culture, right? It actively projects its own immense soft power right back into the US. Indian traditions related to health, wellness, and spirituality, deeply rooted in the legacy of leaders like Swami Vivekananda, have fundamentally shaped modern American fitness, mental health, and alternative medicine. I mean, yoga is quite literally a staple of everyday American life at this point. Finally, let's bring it all together in Section 6, Forging a Hybrid Future. So, what is the bottom line here? Navigating this new hybrid reality requires a real strategy. We absolutely should leverage the incredible wealth generation and innovation of the global economy, but at the exact same time, we have to demand better workplace boundaries to protect our mental health against that toxic hustle culture. We can and should embrace global ideas, but we also have to consciously preserve the core of our civilizational identity and, above all, maintain independent, critical thinking amidst this absolute flood of digital information. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on today. As the world continues to shrink and our screens pull us closer and closer to models and lifestyles thousands of miles away, how do you build a global career without losing your civilizational soul? It is absolutely the defining challenge of our era. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.